Welcome to responding to the comment section. A few weeks ago, I had some very choice words to say about certain people in the comment section. Now, these choice words may or may not have been provoked by certain comments that were left on certain posts online. And I'm not one to get petty, but I do think it is important for us, because I do say this in the podcast, we like to respond to comments. Now, I try to do my best to respond to the comments, on the platform, whether that be YouTube or Instagram. But I thought it best that we also post a video responding to comments and just do, knock out a bunch of them while we're at it, right? So there are a few comments I want to address this week. We've got several comments that were left on our podcast clips from the Jefferson podcast, and in particular, Thomas Jefferson's thoughts on national debt. Now, the clip was a small snippet. I think it was no more than 20 seconds. Basically, it had me saying that Thomas Jefferson believed that national debt was a national disgrace. I will actually pull up the video and share it on my screen right now, and we will watch it real quick because why not? All right, can you guys see this okay?
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to share sound here. All right. Oh. National disgrace, which I really love. Whereas that's what Jefferson thought, and then you had Hamilton, who thought that we could build our economy through national debt, and so you kind of had these diametrically opposed people on this issue. Jefferson really hated national debt. He thought national debt was all right, guys, that's the clip. Very short. Like I said, this is a very small snippet of hour and 20 long minute podcast that we did. This was not a short podcast. We put in a lot of work in this podcast, and we talked about a lot of things. And a little bit interesting. We got some responses, so we'll just go to the first response. This is a response from Anthony Hollingworth. Anthony has to say, owning people and knowing nothing about elementary macroeconomics, period. Gotta take the rough with the smooth on TJ. Thank goodness Hamilton understood finance, and he really should be the right-wing fanboy's fave, given his founding of American mercantilism and capitalism. What do you guys think? What do we want to say back to Anthony? I think it's an interesting point. I don't know how I feel about it.
I would say that it was a valid comment until that portion about the right-wing fanboy, that the politicization of the clip didn't really make sense to me, because we weren't overtly taking sides against Hamilton or for Jefferson. It was more comparing and contrasting their two views of how we should run the country. So I think that individual was a little quick to presume our intentions for that comment.
Yeah, I will give him benefit of the doubt and say that he's watching a 20-second clip out of an hour and 20-minute podcast. These clips are meant to get you to click on the full podcast. You cannot take things completely out of context. They don't always come across. There's no way I can pack an hour and 20 minutes into 20 seconds. So that's just where I'm coming from there. Now, I would agree with you, Jake. I think he makes everything was valid up until the right wing fanboy. I really don't get that. Didn't make any sense to me. Like you said too, we weren't really taking sides. We were pointing out both kind of ideas that Jefferson and Hamilton had, and picking the flaws in each of them. I mean, we talked about both of them and the possible flaws with each. So
From what I remember, I think we had a lot of positive things to say about Hamilton too. I think we adequately explained his side of the aisle of why maybe at that time there was a little more cause for a more centralized government. So it wasn't just a whole, it wasn't a hit piece on Hamilton by any means. I think
no.
I think it was mainly it was a podcast about Jefferson. So obviously we're going to flesh out his views a little more in depth than the other side of the aisle. But yeah, it was by no means an attack on anybody else.
I would agree with you there. My response to Anthony would be, please go listen to our full podcast. Learn more. I think that's a fair response.
I think so.
Moving on. Travis Young also commented on the same post. Travis Young's comment, not as constructive. I would not say this comment would make me want to engage in further discourse with this individual. But what do I know? Maybe Travis is a very bright young lad, and he has a lot to offer mentally. And maybe he's got a lot of, maybe he's a better speaker than he is writer. We'll just say that. Travis Young says he also thought owning people was fine. So who cares what he thought? Travis, fair point on the owning people. I don't think that was right either. What I will say is that if you listen to the full podcast, you would have heard us talk about not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And I think that applies here, because not everything Jefferson said or did was stupid. He wrote the Declaration of Independence. Now, while he might have owned slaves, which we don't agree with, he also did write something that set the precedent for many movements across the world to push for independence and freedom of the individuals in that population. So I don't think you can say, who cares what he thought, because that would be uneducated. So I would also encourage you, go listen to the full podcast, educate yourself more. But that's just where I stand. What do I know?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, it's easy to think about one thing that seems obvious now, like why. I think what Travis is coming from is saying, hey, he did something really bad, so why is anything he did good? I think is what he's saying. But yeah, it's like, well, he was actually going to put in freeing of all slaves in the Declaration. That was, they thought might have been too much, and so he backed off. But he went back and forth a lot, like trying to figure out whether or not slavery was okay or not. And I mean, granted, Jefferson had a lot of failings, but he also did a lot of really good things. And I think you have to understand his full story in order to make an educated comment.
I would agree with that. And I made this point in the podcast, but if we are going to judge Jefferson on the choices that he made in the time that he made those choices, and this is in no way condoning his stances on slavery or slavery for that matter, but if we're going to condemn him for that, we might as well condemn ourselves for propping up the child labor industries, for propping up the sex trafficking industry through industries like pornography and all these other things. When I say propping up the child labor industries, look at where most of our clothing and shoes are made at. If you're holding an iPhone right now, which most likely you are, most of the materials that were used to build that iPhone were probably procured or made unethically. If you really want to go down a pretty sad rabbit hole, go look at what cobalt mining does to people. There are literally women in Africa with carrying around babies, and these babies are dying from the dust, and they're working for pennies, if not, enslaved, to mine cobalt so you can power your pretty little Tesla or Prius. So if we really want to go down this rabbit hole of blaming and go down this rabbit hole of playing the moral high ground game, I would caution yourself and look at a lot of the things maybe you don't want to recognize that you're doing that might be propping up immorality in this world. It's just, and it's not to say that we should all, throw away our iPhones tomorrow, but we should be working for a better tomorrow. So what would people 200 years from now say about you? So let's just look at it through those lenses. We shouldn't, and I'm sure not everything, I think we could all agree, not everything Travis is doing is a horrible misdeed, but I'm sure he left that comment from his iPhone or Android. So just fair point. Moving on. I would just like to touch on a comment we received on Instagram, and this will be the last comment of the day. And this was wow, this guy went out of his way, kudos to him. This thing was an essay. I don't think I wrote this much in my entirety of being at college. So kudos to this man. And this is no way putting down this man. He had actually very intelligent comment, and it made me think quite a bit. And I even took the time to create a response. But he mentioned, I will find the comment here. This was on my highly contentious moon landing theory video that I posted about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago from our podcast with Peter. And I had a theory that I put out to the internet, and not everybody took to it. So we'll just read his comment first. This is from Joe X Powers 92 on Instagram. Joe says, "Why would you go through the process of staging this massive undertaking and spending all of the money on a hoax if it were actually possible? I think people will look for every possible explanation to fit the narrative that they have been fed at some level, rather than just accepting the fact that it was all a lie. You can say the moon landing was faked by the US to assert dominance over Russia, which was my argument, in the space race, but anyone who knows what's going on knows that basically every nation is controlled by the hidden hands of the elites anyways, so they would just be doing all this to beat themselves in the race, ... I don't buy it. It was to strengthen the programming that we live on, a floating ball in space, and an infinitely expanding black hole. Not sure what that's talking about. They want us to feel like we are meaningless, and our existence was just the byproduct of a random explosion. But the truth is we're all here because we were created to be here." I agree with that. "This doesn't mean that there isn't anything left to explore or any other life to meet. We just need to look out, not up. There's a reason why they're called extraterrestrials. Extra terra. Terra is of Latin and Greek origin." I appreciate the digging you're doing here and the point you're making. He's going into Latin and Greek. This is pretty intelligent. Terra is meaning earth in Latin and Greek. I don't think these beings would be referred to those of the extra Earth if they inhabited different planets like Mars or some other planets in another galaxy trillions of light years away. It would make sense to consider these other planets as extra Earth if they were completely detached and, by their standard, in some cases, in completely different galaxies. But hey, it's just my take. I could be completely wrong here and misled, but I honestly doubt it. Well, Joe, first of all, I would just like to thank you. This comes from a very honest place. I'm not being deceitful here in any way. Um, that was a pretty well thought out response to my video, and I appreciate you taking the time. That I don't know how long that took you to type on Instagram. I know I can barely type like 3 sentences to respond to people on Instagram, so that personally is like impressive. But he's got a lot of interesting theories there. This guy sounds like he would be an interesting man to have on the podcast. He seems like he's got some ideas. This Joe guy. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what you guys think about that. I have my little response, but I'll let you guys kind of just. What do you guys think?
Lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
I would say his knowledge of space race and probably most things exceeds my my parameters. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I would say the same as you. I would compliment him on a well put together essay. Almost is what it was.
It really was.
Actually, seems like he can defend an argument well. Yeah, I agree. I think he'd be
He hopped into the conspiracy theory a little bit and didn't
Right.
stay in the space race, which I'm going to come back to him with my response now because I got some
Yeah.
things for Joe to think about. All right. And this is where I'm coming from with my, we didn't land on the moon when we said we did. We landed on the moon, but just not when we said we did. To start this, I just want to clarify, I know absolutely zero about astrophysics or the moon's gravitational pull, and that would probably help in having a really deep understanding what the pictures and videos would look like of the moon landing, because that will play into my response a little bit here. But many of the pictures and images circulated at the time of the moon landing do seem fairly fake, at least in my opinion. They look like they were staged. One reason that is Neil Armstrong's boot pictures, the boot print pictures, don't actually match the boot tread he was wearing on the I guess you could call it like a voyage on their trip to space. So that's a little bit interesting there. So the boot print, that famous boot print picture, doesn't really match up with what they would have been wearing when they landed on the moon. Second, the rock in one of the photos, if you look at it, it almost looks like it has the letter C written on it, and it looks like a stage prop. And side note, many of the moon rocks that were collected from this mission were actually fake, and one was gifted to the Dutch Prime Minister by Neil Armstrong, and it turned out that it was petrified wood. They tested it years later. So either the moon rock was stolen from the Dutch Prime Minister and replaced with petrified wood, or Neil Armstrong just handed out a piece of petrified wood to the Dutch Prime Minister. They're like, here, we made it to the moon. Have this moon rock. So that's a pretty funny one. My third argument for why these moon landing photos were faked or staged at that time were there were no stars. If you look at the pictures, and this could just be a coincidence, but there were no stars in the night sky. This is something I noticed on all the pictures. So you assume you're on the moon, maybe you see stars in the night sky. I mean, I don't, like I said, no expert here, so I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know if but that's something I noticed. It's like a black screen, like almost like it was filmed, like taken in a studio. And then the big one is the flag in the photos. If you look at the American flag, it seems to be blowing in the wind. But, again, limited knowledge here, but I'm pretty sure that's impossible because I don't think space has like wind. I mean, am I wrong, guys? Am I stupid there? I don't think the moon, there's wind on the moon. Pretty sure it doesn't work
No,
like
I
that.
don't. I don't believe so.
So there's like a ruffle in the flag, like it's blowing in the wind. Maybe a fan in a studio blowing it. But I just again limited knowledge here. So I think it is possible that the photos and the videos circulating are fake. But the moon landing actually happened. I think those two things are completely like possible together. I think that it's reasonable. It's a reasonable conclusion to come to say maybe the moon landing happened when they said it happened, but how did they have, how did they take all the pictures? How was the film brought back? Did they have quality photos? Did they have to stage these things to make a big publicity thing out of it? I mean, there's a lot of different variables here. Like, how did they get the film? I'm pretty sure the film actually, upon reentry, I read something, would actually not make it through reentry. So like, how did they get film? How did they take these photos and then bring it back? It just seems something was staged here. So I don't know where that leaves us. Was it completely faked? Did they make it up there and then they just didn't have footage and they're like, well, nobody's going to believe us now. So then they had to stage some footage. I don't know. But that's just kind of my stance on it. I think there's something going on with this whole moon landing thing. And I just don't know if it's a complete hoax or if it's possible maybe we did make it and we just were bad at gathering photos and we had to recreate some. So that would be my response to the whole fake thing. I think his whole point about the one world order thing is very interesting. I don't necessarily agree with it to the extent that I still think there was a space race, and I think that there was definitely tensions between Russia and the U.S. I don't think that was all just faked and staged. I have a hard time believing that. But what do I know? Maybe that's all false. Like I said, we don't know the answers to this. So, Joe, thank you for your comment. Greatly appreciated it. Actually, that one made me think.
Yeah, it's always good to have people that respond and share their thoughts with what we're talking about because, I mean, we're just three guys trying to learn about the world and the truth, so everything more we're always accepting.
Absolutely. I'm always up for a good conversation or debate. I always like when they're intelligent. So, if you want to leave us a comment, we will probably respond in another video. We'll do another, responses to comments because I do enjoy this. And then maybe we'll just do a YouTube live or Instagram live, and we'll do live Q&A. And that might be fun too. But I do appreciate all the comments. I really do. Even the negative ones, because that just fires me up and motivates me to come back and bring more content to you guys. So hopefully you enjoyed this segment of the comment section. And we'll be back with another one. Thanks, guys.